I love the idea of online programs, but my state has limited my ability to sell herbs to out-of-state patients. Will that limit my success in the DGC program and annual membership? This one's a biggie, right? There's going to be certain levels of gray area and risk tolerance that different people are comfortable with. And I'm going to present in this video high risk tolerance all the way to very low and playing it safe. And there's a whole spectrum of different ways to do this. So just because your state is out of line, in my opinion, telling you what you can and can't do for people in other state, right? Which, I mean, we can argue this if you want. Like, your state board is there to protect the citizens of the state from a professional not acting correctly, right? The state board in your state is not there to protect the citizens of another state from you selling them herbs. They're, I think, out of line, though I'm not a lawyer, right? I'm not an attorney. I'm not a fucking judge, right? So you're going to want to consult your own CPA, your own attorney, right? All these things, your own malpractice, right? Contact your people. My job here, as I've made it, is to open your mind to different possibilities. You can then explore those possibilities. Let us know what you find, because your situation, your mileage may vary. But I'm going to go from severe acceptance of risk all the way down to something very, very, very conservative. The first thing you want, I got a bunch of notes because this is a big one, but the first thing you want to start to look at is like the language. I can't sell herbs to patients. What does that even mean? Because patients, right? Well, if you don't have a doctor-patient relationship with somebody, then it sounds like that doesn't apply, right? Why can't you sell herbs to a person, a human, somewhere? If they're not your patient, then your Practice Act shouldn't apply to that relationship. Consult an attorney, again, and look at your Practice Act. Look at what's written, not just what somebody on the phone told you when you called, and get a good answer here. The other one is sell herbs. What does that mean? Are they trying to say prescribe herbs? And what is that? What are those definitions, right? Is prescription like a custom formulation, or is it where you say, I prescribe you this, even if it's a patent or a pre-made formula? You got to find out these distinctions so that you know what you're dealing with, so you know what kind of room you have. I'm not doing this to let's be pushy. I'm saying you need to get some clarity on what's ambiguous, right? Because if you don't define your relationship with somebody as a patient, and you're not prescribing herbs, right? Does this even apply? Does this even matter? Because, right, there's plenty of places online people can get herbs. Plenty of places. So if one of the things you wanted to do was get an account with like a drop shipper, there's companies, there's individuals, there's people doing this stuff, selling herbs, selling granules, selling whatever. There's stuff on Amazon. There's herbs all over the place, right? So you could decide what you want to do with that. One thing I will offer is that we have some advantages here with Doctors Club because we have a network of practitioners in our community. So you may have somebody who's willing to drop ship herbs on your behalf with an online storefront, and the members you're working with, or the clients or the customers or whatever you want to call it that aren't your patients, that are in another state, can just go to this other website owned by somebody else, and that person will mail them to your people when they check out. Not a problem. And if you want to keep it really clean, you don't even get a financial kickback from that. You just do it because you know that the herbs will be helpful for them, and that's fine, because they've paid an annual membership fee to be in your program, where you're teaching them lessons on self-care and health practices and whatever else you got in there. Gasotransmitter therapy, nutrition, like all the stuff that it's clinical gold, it's gems, all the Yangsheng stuff, right? You need to start to value the knowledge you have. So having that in there and having you be in an environment online with people where you got their back and you can explain things, you can teach them about herb formulas. You can say, oh yeah, in Chinese medicine, we use this kind of formula for that, and this kind of formula is for these types of people. They tend to do really well. So there are a lot of ways around this without even you financially benefiting from anything and not having patients. So there's one, okay? There's e-com businesses where they'll help women, for example, go onto a website. It's like an e-com, and it has to do with their cycle, menstrual issues. And there'll be a quiz. Tell us about your stuff. Oh, I get bloating, I get headaches, whatever else. Oh, okay. Well, we have this formula, this formula, this formula. That one's kind of fits this pattern. You can buy it yourself. Oh, if you don't know which one to get, you can call our customer support line, and we actually have practitioners who can answer your questions, right? How is that not practicing without a license? Maybe it is, right? Maybe you don't want to emulate that, but maybe you could look at some of these models and go, how are they getting around this? Are they getting around it? And how are they getting around it? Right? Because sometimes it's just like, I'm not talking about you and your diagnosis. I'm talking about these products and the problems that people tend to use them for. There's your checkout link, and that's very easy. Another one is just not to use herbs if you don't want to use herbs. Another one is to set up a PMA, right? Private Membership Association. One type of PMA is also called a PMA. It's a private ministry association, but there's different ones. They don't all have a ministerial or semi-religious connotation. And we have a whole section in the program called Burn Your License, where I've got information and resources on that if that's the kind of structure you want to set up. The idea here with a PMA is that you're private, which means you're not in the public sphere of interactions, right? There's two ways we can kind of categorize our relationships, private and public. So if you're in a public relationship, like you have a LLC or something like that, and you've got a business and people come to your business, right? The public comes into your business and they become your patients. By virtue of that type of relationship, you're regulated by the state. The state's job is to protect the public. I'm speaking generally about America, and again, I'm not an attorney, so you're going to need to do your own due diligence on this stuff. And of course, I've got a shit ton of resources on this in the program under the Burn Your License. It's in the resources section. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this kind of from another angle too. But essentially, when you're in the private, you're out of public regulation. Practicing medicine without a license doesn't apply in the private. Licenses are for the public sphere, right? If you're in the private, you still have to pay taxes. It's not a way to get out of taxes and things like that. You still have to claim your income, and you have to get an accountant that can help you set things up or get an EIN or whatever off of a PMA that you form, right? A private association that you form. And you have to have your paperwork and all that very clearly spelled out. Now, this is what people use, for example, when states are doing things that I would consider fucking ridiculous, like saying you can't have raw milk, right? And there's farmers with cows that want to sell raw milk. And there's people who want it because they think it's healthier, right? So then the farm will just start a PMA. It's a private membership thing. It's not public. We're not a public company. We're a private membership. People who are members of our farm can buy all the raw milk they want, right? This can get controversial. Sometimes homeschool organizations will set up PMAs, and you can get raided. You can have a hard time. There are organizations that will help you fight that. You know, if you do get raided for that, it could be like 20 grand to get representation or more to help you get out of it. They have a pretty good track record of doing that, but there's some risks associated because the people who want to control will try to find ways to control, and they sure as shit don't like people going outside of their system. Right? Now, that being said, the American Bar Association that all lawyers are a part of is itself a private membership association, right? So these things are legitimate. It's just a matter of if somebody in a government agency or official capacity wants to go after you or not, right? They will try to find a way. And even if you have, if you have a license in a state and you're under that, you're in the public sphere and somebody wants to go after you, they'll still fucking go after you. They'll go after your license. Right? I mean, it's kind of the illusion of safety. Like, well, if I just do everything I'm told by the authorities, then I'll be safe. No, not at all. If they decide they want to fuck with you, they will. They just will. That's what they do. You know, they're not always aligned to things that make any sense or any good. Now, that said, a lot of times they're trying to protect the public, right? Or at least they think they are. But we know, laws can change over time. Used to be slavery was legal in the United States. Like, that doesn't seem to match anything moral or ethical, right? Like the laws do this, so sometimes you're on the wrong side of the law, even though you're doing the right thing, if that makes sense. But that's a little more risk tolerant, right? Going, okay, well, I'm going to go outside the whole system. I'll start a PMA. I'll just do that. What I will say, the other side of this is that, with COVID and things like that, a lot of practitioners who were still in the public were getting harassed and bullied by their licensing boards. And I know how that goes. And there was a lot of overreach, overstep. There's a lot of mandates. There's a lot of stuff that, no matter your opinion on vaccines and whatever else, the coercion and the manipulation and the overstep, right? That's beyond, we can't argue about that, right? That they're not allowed to be doing that. They're abusing their power over the professional practitioners, right? So there's been a fair amount of folks who have gone independent and gone into the private sphere. Now, what the private sphere means is that you have a private relationship and basically a private contract with the people you're working with, just like it's implied. For example, if you are in acupuncture school and you don't have an acupuncture license because you're a student, and you go home on the holidays and you put needles in all your family on Thanksgiving, right? They're not going to sue you for practicing without a license. It's a private relationship. And that's what these kinds of associations do, is they house all the people you're working with in this private container. It's as if they're an extension of your family, right? So it's something to consider. But what I will say with this is that some of this stuff, we have to be aware of if it's a trauma response or not on our parts as practitioners. And I've had to go through this in depth. But like, you wind up on the wrong side of things and you're just like, fuck it, dude, and you go into like prepper mode, survival mode, and you're like, I'm all private, I'm sovereign, and I'm not saying that's the wrong thing to do. It may be the right thing to do, but also examine if there's trauma associated with that, right? So if the desire to be completely free is also coupled with fear, then you can still be free, but then you do the brain work, right? Do your own due diligence on your own brain, your own limbic system and everything else, and get rid of some of that fear so that you can be free and happy, not free and escaping something, right? So that's kind of what I'll offer there is just a little bit of introspection, because I've had to go through it myself. So there's a PMA. Another option is to just keep it in your state. If you want to work under your license and you want to do online programs and you want to sell herbs, then just keep it in your state. Right? Like this person who asked is Massachusetts, right? How many people are in Massachusetts? How many people are in Boston? How many people are, that's where you send your ads. It's easy enough. You could do that. You could just say, okay, well, I'm licensed in this state. Another option would be if you have another state you want to work in, get a license for that. Right? And I'm not going to sit here and say like, well, you should get a license in each state so that you can just do everything all over the whole country, right? And with this kind of Practice Act, this Massachusetts Practice Act, I don't know exactly what it says. I've asked to see it, but I don't have the link for this. But if you have licenses in 2 states, how would that work? Right? What if you're licensed in a state that doesn't care what you do with herbs? And you're licensed in a state who says, you can't sell herbs. Well, this license says I can, so fuck off. Right? Maybe that's the answer. I'm going to attach, I did some research on this, and I found a spreadsheet that another acupuncturist made. I don't know this person, but I found it in one of the groups. And I think it's a pretty good resource. You're going to want to check everything on there because it may be things have changed since it was compiled. But I'll try to find a way to put the link for this. And you can find the spreadsheet, and it's got all 50 states in the U.S. Sorry, other countries, but we're just doing the U.S. states at the moment. And it's got the licensing requirements, whether they need NCAOM, whether they require herbs and things like that. It's all broken down. So you might look at that and go, okay, what states are safe, to work with people in? You might look at that and go, out of all these states, which one would I like to carry a secondary license in, even if you don't live there? Oh, Jeremy, I don't want to live there. I feel weird applying for a license. Not at all. Just tell them. Say, hey, I don't live in this state, but I'm thinking about it. I'd like to be licensed there. I want to work with people in this state. So this is why I'm doing it. It's not, you don't have to be defrauding people. You don't have to live in a state to have a license there at all. I'm going to share with you a detail here, but I had a license in Wisconsin for a while. And I thought at the time that they were extremely easy to deal with. So if you just need a license, right, and you might check the Wisconsin, because I don't know what it says in there about prescribing herbs and doing telehealth and all that. I'm just giving you a little tip, and it's up to you to explore it. But at the time, for me, Wisconsin was no NCCAOM, no bullshit. They had a fast turnaround. It was like $50 or something to be licensed, and they weren't up your ass about every single thing. You may want to have a safe harbor type license in another state and then run a whole business through that, right? And that's another thing too, like, oh, I've got my clinic, and I've got this state board that's up my ass and all this. Well, you set up a separate business entity if you want to keep it really clean. All your online stuff goes through this, either a PMA or an LLC or an S Corp or whatever you've set up that has nothing to do with your on-the-ground work in Massachusetts or wherever you are, right? Just 2 separate businesses. Oh, then I'm going to have to pay extra, tax burden and stuff. Maybe, I don't know, talk to your accountant about it. Maybe there's ways around it where you can keep things separate. You can just do a DBA or something like that. You can keep things separate just for that extra layer of avoiding confusion, There's a lot of creative ways around this. What I'll say too is that that's a fully online program. So even if all this stuff was scary, Jeremy, I'm so afraid of fucking boards and regulatory agencies, and I don't know, PMA sounds really ballsy. I'm not sure I'm ready to do that yet. Fine, great. The stuff we do here, for one, is going to make you a better practitioner. I don't care what your license is or where you live. That's incredibly valuable because it ripples into everything. The way you sell treatment plans, the way you have conversion, the way you attract people, the way you organize your skill set, your clinical clarity is a huge fucking lever mover for all this stuff, right? So there's that. But the other is just go with a hybrid. Do all the hybrid stuff in our program where you're learning how to set up a hybrid online brick and mortar situation where people can come into higher ticket offers that are your face-to-face people, and there's an online component behind it supporting them. So you don't have to do this all day long in your clinic repeating the same thing to everybody, and they can actually be a part of something, right? So the hybrid model is extremely strong. It also frames, even for people that aren't in your hybrid offer, I mean, there's ways, like there's clinical resources and stuff in the Brick and Mortar Magic and our hybrid section. You can learn how to make these things where when somebody comes in, even if it's for like carpal tunnel or something like that, they're not going to be in your hybrid program, but they'll know you have one. And it actually frames it. It makes the price of your visits, it frames everything. It makes a much easier yes. And it helps them listen to you better because they know you're doing this other thing that's more specialized. So even if you only want to work in your clinic under your license and you don't want to deal with the board having any leverage over you whatsoever, I would still say you could make a lot of success here following the hybrid plan. And then in the meantime, you're building up these crazy skills. So one day if you do move to another state, or if they change the practice language, or you want to do a PMA or whatever, you're tooled up in terms of what you're able to do. And so you can start there. I'm just going to check my notes and make sure I've got everything. You can talk to your malpractice. Yeah, I had some notes here. You can talk to your malpractice about that, about telehealth and things like that. And again, like telehealth versus group coaching. Telehealth are patients. Group coaching is the clients, members. It's a different deal. You can't prescribe things to members. They're not your patients. So sometimes it's linguistic, but that's how the law works. You're also going to want to look at additional professional liability insurance, right? Because malpractice is for you and your patients. So if you want to have a different insurance, maybe just a general business liability insurance for the members and clients you work with, right? That kind of thing. Might look at that. If you're not doing consultations or calls, like this is one of the strengths of our model, right? I don't have any sales calls. So that can't possibly be confused for a consultation for somebody out of state. Oh, you're doing telehealth without a license. Oh yeah? When was that Zoom call I did with this person? When was that? Never. What are we talking? How is it telehealth? Right? What are we talking about? So again, consult an attorney. But what I'm doing is stacking the deck to get rid of that risk of some authority overstepping and misunderstanding what's going on. Right? You got to understand, like a lot of this stuff, the way I see it, and I've got a optimistic lens on this, but a lot of these organizations, regulatory organizations, they're there to protect the public, okay? So the old way is the doctor wears the white coat and is the boss and fucking tells the patient what to do. You got to take this. I prescribe this. You got to do that. It's disempowering for the patient, right? And that's the nature of the relationship. So now you have regulatory boards stepping in to protect that disempowered patient from doctors going over the edge. When you shift that, when your business model, your practice model, everything else is aligned to empowering people, then you tell them what to do way less, if at all. You show them. Here's this, here's that, tends to help people in your situation. Go, get to work, right? If that's the energetic you have with the people you're helping, it's a lot different. Like they don't need protection from you because it's them doing it. You're a source of information. If you wrote a book, is that practicing medicine without a license? Oh, I wrote a book about these herbs for people, and then they go buy the herbs somewhere. How is that? How are you dealing with that? Of course, you put the disclaimer in there, right? None of this is medical advice. This is for education, information purposes only. All the other things you have to do in a litigious society. But I mean, you make it clear. I've delivered information in a vessel. This person has taken that information and taken it upon themselves to act on it. They can talk to their own doctor first. They can do whatever, right? Get an acupuncturist in your town. Talk to them. Sure. Like, why not encourage all that? Oh, Jeremy, but if I do that, then they won't think my program is valuable. It is, because you're going to be knowing what you're talking about, and they can feel that. They're going to want your help with this stuff. So if it was a book, how are you practicing medicine without a license? I don't know. If it's a video of you reading what would have been in your book, how are you practicing medicine without a license? I don't know. It's interesting, right? Interesting questions. A lot of this stuff comes up with sovereignty, The system assumes people don't have any, right? We assume they do. We wind up at odds with that sometimes. Obviously, you can't bill insurance for this stuff. You can't use people's their little HSAs, things like that. If that's not your patient, then you shouldn't be using medical reimbursements. So it's just going to be a cash deal, which is fine, right? So there are some thoughts on that should get you started. Depending on your level of risk tolerance and whatever else, there's definitely ways around this stuff. And some of it would help if we had more clear language on what the Practice Act is and all that. But even regardless of this state, this stuff happens here and there, and there's always ways. Where there's a will, there's a way. Absolutely. I hope that helps. Get to work.